And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to another victorious edition of Hoosier Morning After. This is Hoosier Morning After Minnesota. Late last night, your Indiana Hoosiers go on to battle through quite a game, but end up with the win, 61-57, taking the record for the Hoosiers on to 14-6 and over 500 now in the Big Ten, 5-4. A 4-game win streak that you don't hear about or doesn't happen very often in Big Ten play. So it's something we will take. Obviously, a game where execution wasn't the best, finishing wasn't the best. IU kind of really struggled with a lot of the easy ones, a lot of the layups and everything, and it was kind of one of those games where you feel like we can't put anything in the basket, and the other team just kind of is able to put everything in the basket. Battle a player on their team that has struggled in the past, but does have a pedigree and a history of being a good player and making good shots. Has that wake up game like we tend to bring out of players occasionally, and but IU did enough fight and kept in it to get through it. And waking up this morning, I had the thought of this is going to be a quick Hoosier Morning After, like the game, and let's just kind of get it over, move on to the next one. But as I sit and kind of started to delve into things, and that's how I do it, a little window into the production of this podcast. I may take a few notes during the game just to remind myself of moments I want to talk about, but I take my daughter out to the bus stop at 6:00. I come back, I come right into my office, and I start to delve in, looking at footage, watching clips from Twitter, listening to post game, listening to a few other podcasts, what kind of they're saying and everything like that. And then I start to kind of view that in the vein of Hoosier Morning After, with the morning after eyes. How does it look to me now? What do I think now? And there's a lot of things I think that we can talk about. There's a lot of things that we can digest and look back on in this game that are interesting. There are some things that obviously need to be addressed, and we'll get to that. But in the end, again, it was a win for Indiana. Minnesota went on to miss their last 11 shot attempts in this game. Their last made basket, besides 2 free throws, was a 3-pointer by Battle at the 6-minute mark. So again, some things were good, some things were bad in this game. And as we break down and talk about each player overall, and a lot of them struggled in this game, but almost everyone made at least one play that if they didn't, then we might have lost the game. So that's one thing to, as we get critical into that, to think of. Like, think about Trey had a 3-pointer that he hit that gave IU the lead halfway through the second half and kind of sparked a little bit of a run for us. And then Miller Kopp diving on that loose ball towards the end of the game and calling timeout. So while it is a struggle to find a lot of positives out of this game amongst a sea of negatives, there at least was the fight and a few playmaking abilities by different players that contributed to Indiana skirting out through this. But we're going to dive into that as we talk through everything. So I'm your host, Chad Schwarzkopf. Here with me, as always, is Martha, the mop lady. Martha, give me your thoughts on last night.
I've told you often how much I value the night's sleep you allow me before jumping on live with you. I was, kind of had a foul taste in my mouth. I mean, a win is a win, right? And you hit the nail on the head when you talked about winning 4 in a row. And I think you'll take that all day, every day. And I think when the news came out with, yesterday afternoon that Minnesota was going to be missing Dawson Garcia, the other guy that I'm forgetting his name in the moment, but combined, I think, 17, 18 points. It's like, okay. And it's not like Minnesota's, I think they'd won 7 games going into this. So the perception is right that you're going to come into this and have a relatively easy time with the way we're playing. And, it shouldn't be a massive ordeal to come in here and get a win, but it's also the barn, right? It's also a place where weird things happen, and then the news breaks that we're missing our head coach, and that's a little bit more adversity, right? So And I was somewhat critical of Coach Roseman and the way he managed the game, and as I slept on it and woke up, it's not like he asked to coach the game. It's not like, hey, give me a chance to be the head coach. It was his scout, and it was kind of an ordeal that was handed him. I still don't necessarily understand the substitution patterns in the second half, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But it's another occasion where Indiana was faced with some adversity, and instead of folding like they have sometimes in the past, they handled it and they found a way to win. So I think that's what you have to take away from this. Yeah, it was a little bit rough on the eyes and it wasn't pretty, but it usually isn't in the barn. So I think you take this one, learn from it, and move on. So at the end of the day, it's a win. 4 Big Ten wins, over 500 in the league. That's all that matters. So you got to be happy with that.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and talk about that coaching situation. And again, overall, I like what you said there because it did give us that weird feel. Because again, we always come into the barn thinking that it's the barn, the weird elevated court. It's just a weird feel for the players, and we've always kind of it is a little bit. Obviously, from what it sounds like, they didn't know that Woody wasn't a go until about early this morning. It sounded like, or yesterday morning, and everything. And it was said by Ya in the post game that Woody's rule has always been that if he was ejected or removed from a game, that whatever coach had the scout for that game or was the one which, if you don't know, every assistant coach is given a team, an opponent that they scout out and make a game plan, help to make a game plan for the team. And so this was Coach Ya's scout. And so that's what happened. He then took over. I in the beginning I saw that information, and like many of you thought that Coach Hunter would be the one that would kind of take the lead, just because he seems to be the most senior of the assistant coaches and everything. But this is what was laid out by Woody, and this was what happened. And obviously, there's been a lot of criticism on Twitter about that, and I think one of the biggest criticisms that's come from the game, in that sense, in the coaching sense, is the substitution patterns, and more macro to that, not playing Malik in the second half. And my view on that, while mixed, I admit, is the fact that, and it's a kind of an argument that we've had to have and state a lot this year, and just in Woody's time at IU. You almost have to reprogram your brain to a degree. We think about players going in and them playing about how their offensive impact, but their defensive impact is also heavily weighted as to why they're in there. And I think that was obviously, and it's been made in comments by the coaches after the game, was why they did not play Malik as much as they did. He would not have played Battle as tough as Race Thompson did. Even the hobbled Race Thompson, Malik still struggles off the bounce. And as he got in there for those first couple minutes, we saw that from it. He got beat on one, and then he made a foul on another. So that was the reason behind that. Should he have had a little bit more go to maybe give us some things offensively? Maybe. But in the long run, I think that was the proper go. Your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. I too was surprised by the substitution patterns in the second half. And I think a lot of it was magnified by the struggles on the offensive end. I mean, we were really, really obviously struggling to put points up. Tamar struggled again, and Geronimo didn't have a great game. Trey struggled for most of the game. So it was really the TJD, the effort we got from him was really the difference in large part. And, so it was like, what can we find offensively? And when you had Malik with the first half of 10 points and he's kind of breaking out of it, it's like, why are we not, when we're struggling offensively, why aren't we not giving him a go? And then the reasoning behind it being the matchup. And, it's clear, it's obvious that Race isn't at 100%. So when, visually you're seeing him out there hobble, it's a tough sell, right? So, I still don't know that I necessarily agree with it, but I don't need to agree with it. We left with a win, right? So now had we lost, I think it's a whole different story. We're sitting here probably pounding the table a little bit more like, how in the heck could you not play him? But at the end of the day, they found a way to get it done. So don't necessarily understand it, but I mean, you have to tip your cap to Race. I mean, he's clearly not 100%, but he went out there and battled like we know and have seen Race do. So, you take it, you move on, and we've got a couple big ones coming up. So that's where we're at.
Yep, it is. And Howie in the chat says Malik had fouls to give, and they are a poor free throw shooting team. Could have used his offense. I agree with that to a degree. Howie, where I do struggle with that a little bit is that the momentum that could give as well for Minnesota, because where IU was struggling offensively to get anything done was when a lot of times when we got rushed a little bit trying to beat the zone getting set up and everything. And when another team gets momentum and gets to scoring some points, you're going to try to speed up and make that happen. And I don't know. Again, it's all what ifs and it's all what could have been. So at this point, and like you said, a win is a win and we move on to the next one. But the main reason behind a lot of that win was our all-star player, Trace Jackson-Davis. He has had an unhealthy back for a while, but thank goodness, as the jokes have been pouring in on Twitter, and I'll be the one joining that, the players on and take Indiana to a win in this game. Felt like Trace was a little bit hesitant in the first half, a little bit relaxed. I don't know if, again, that's what to a degree what we talked about, what I said earlier with the knowledge that he's not going to go up against their star players, or it's one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, that kind of whole situation. But he definitely turned it on in the second half and took care of business for Indiana. So we at least have that to look back on. And congratulations, obviously, to him as well for becoming now the all-time block leader, passing Jeff Newton, whose signature is right behind me there on the IU flag. And all he needed was one, and he got six. A great game by him at the end, 25 points, and at 11 for 19 from the field, 50% from a three-throw line. Would have liked to see that obviously a little bit better, but 21 rebounds, was just a monster underneath and everything. What did you think of Trace last night?
At times you just, because you expect it at this point. I mean, he's putting up ridiculous numbers. You kind of the sense that, man, we're really taking this for granted. But man, he just, to your point, no wonder his back's sore because he's kind of been carrying us, right? I mean, but you look at the last few games, right, and the numbers he's put up, and where we'd be if he hadn't. I mean. And the records he's breaking, right? I think, block record. And I saw another stat. I meant to write it down late last night. I was laying in bed that 25 points, 20, I can't remember what the stat was, but one of the very few players to accomplish what he did statistically. And again, I say he does it quietly. He doesn't really do it quietly. We've just come to expect it. So I'm starting to think, man, you do have that COVID fifth year that, if we can get our NIL heads together, let's bring you back one more. Right. But no, listen, he's the reason we won. Right. We've got a bunch of guys that have been playing pretty streaky basketball offensively. And he's been kind of the one exception statistically. So he's our leader. He's our captain. And I don't think we escape with that win if it wasn't for him, obviously.
Yep. So I'd like to announce right now that Hoosier Morning After, Martha and I are going to go on Shark Tank and pitch to Mark Cuban a IU national title, and we just need millions from him for NIL money to keep Trace next year. So we'll get our pitch together,
Love it.
guys, and we'll get on that show. But overall, then the rest of the team that we kind of dive into, like I said before, did have some struggles, but had some good plays in them. Malik obviously was one we touched on a little bit there, but Jalen Hood-Schifino was kind of one of those games where he felt rushed again. Took a lot of shots that were just too early in the shot clock. I think part of that, as I said before, was there's kind of two ways, obviously, to beat a zone. One where you can just beat it down the court before it can get set, because a zone without everyone in position is just kind of shambles. So you beat it down the court before it's set, or you're just doing it with entry passes, a big man coming out, and a little bit of high-low game, kind of penetrating in, different things you can do. And IU did a lot of those things good, but I felt like Jalen Hood-Schifino was trying to do that too often, breaking it down before it was set, and got those rushed kind of moments for him. Still like what he does for Indiana leading this team overall, but I think it was just one of those games that just kind of got away with him to a degree. What do you think of Jalen?
Yeah, another kind of a streaky shooter as we've seen, and we've talked a lot about him falling in love with that, mid to long range jumper, and just his ability to kind of know when he's not feeling it. I give him a pass last night because nobody was feeling it, and we needed somebody to step up offensively. Outside of, you look at our production from the perimeter, and Miller had a decent game, but outside of Miller, where are we getting points from our guards? And, somebody's got to step up and make some shots. So I give him a little bit of a pass, right? I mean, when a freshman's not knocking down shots, somebody else has to step up on the perimeter and make shots. And we didn't necessarily have that last night. So I don't know that we had any other option but for him to try to keep creating offensively. And unfortunately, he wasn't feeling it. So yeah, it was one of those games where he certainly didn't have, the offensive production that we've seen him have. But again, I don't necessarily fault him in this one. We really struggled to score the basketball, and you look at the minute production across the board, and I haven't necessarily compared it to previous games, but the bench minutes were slim to none. So you take that into consideration as well, but. Hopefully, again, this is kind of an outlier for him. He's going to have these performances occasionally as a freshman, but looking forward to kind of seeing how he bounces back against Ohio State on Saturday.
Yeah, and there are other stats to him, obviously, that you don't mind as well. I mean, 4-to-1 turnover to assist ratio. So in a game where the turnovers felt a lot heavier than they truly were stat-wise, at least was a good game. Now, someone that you mentioned there, and we'll roll right into him, was Miller Kopp. Finished with 11 points, 4 for 9 from the field, 3 for 7 from the three. Got a lot of good threes, and was kind of really our offensive energy early on in the game with the threes that he was hitting, and made you kind of very excited, hitting those two back-to-back threes at the beginning, giving Indiana kind of a lead at both times during those shots. And then did pretty well. I think he struggled in the first half because he was against Battle, and continues to have some struggles on defense, guarding guys on the bounce. But again, in the end, his claim to fame was just that hustle that he continues to give for IU, diving on the floor, getting that rebound, and calling the timeout. Expand a little bit more. You already kind of spoke about him, but expand on your thoughts on Kopp.
Yeah, I think that for myself personally, X being out has really magnified the streakiness of our perimeter play in terms of offensive production. I tweeted out a stat, and I'm sure we'll get to tomorrow, but it's really probably put pressure on everybody that plays on the perimeter for us. And Miller's really stepped up. there are times when he doesn't give us offensive production, but that's usually because he's not shooting the basketball or he's not getting looks. It feels as of late that when Miller gets good looks, he's knocking them down, and that's part of the frustration when we talk a lot about why aren't we getting him more looks, right? I think when we struggle offensively, it's a common go-to of let's create for Miller, because when he does get a look, he does tend to knock it down. He's shooting a lot better this year than he did last year. And that showed a little bit last night, right? Had a couple pretty significant threes. You mentioned even his play, the intangible play, right? He did struggle a little bit defensively early, but he made that massive rebound late in the game where he made the timeout. So just a senior guy stepping up, I think, when we need him to. So I've been really pleased with his play. I still wish, there was a combination of us creating a little bit more for him or him looking to shoot a little bit more, especially when we're struggling offensively. So, but again, escaping with a win, and I think he's a large part of it with some of the intangible plays that he made.
Yeah, and Tamar Bates, you mentioned there as well. We'll flow right into him. A disappointing game from him. Another game where we saw him trying to force his offense and forcing things rather than letting the game come to him, especially coming off such a what felt like a wake-up call game for him, a game where he played where we thought he could be and where we need him to be as being that extra wing contributor for IU. Finished no points, 0 for 3 from the field, missed the 1 3 that he took in just 10 minutes of play. Obviously didn't play much because as they saw him out there, just wasn't feeling it. Tough to see that out of him, because I was really hoping to see him build and snowball off that the play that he had in the Michigan State game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're now, and I tweeted this last night, and it was really something I was watching. Is this is his third game in four games of scoring 0 points, and with his offensive skill set, that's borderline unacceptable. I just, and I'm sure he knows that, right? He knows he's struggling offensively, but I mean, he's a guy that has a skill set that should be scoring 10 points a game. In my opinion. Now, you look last night, and it's not like he was on the court a whole lot. I think 12 minutes. That might even. How many did you say? 12? Is that right?
10 minutes from Bates.
10 minutes. So that's, you also ask, was that leash a little short? But you looked at, even from a body language standpoint, that 3 looked awkward, right? And I'm sure the coaching staff has a great feel for when a streaky shooter like Tamar is either feeling it or he isn't. And so you've got to kind of put some trust in the decision he made and or the staff made. So, but just, we've talked a lot about it, and kind of sounds like a broken record at this point, is when are these games going to become the outlier, and when are the games that we know he's capable of going to become the norm? That's the thing that I think needs to switch for Tamar, is these odd performances have kind of become the norm. And, he's a guy that's, because we've seen his offensive skill set in action. We just saw it this past weekend against Michigan State. I think he had 17 points. So, clearly he's capable of it. It's just streaky shooter, but man, as a sophomore, a guy that you really hope is going to put it together sooner or later, or at a certain point, this kind of becomes who he is, and you've got to consider that as you build your team moving forward as well. So hopefully we get it's beyond time to get a good performance from tomorrow on Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've looked at this yet. I have to ask you, Martha, did you look at the plus minus yet? Don't look if you haven't.
No, I have not.
Okay, so take your guess. Who was the highest plus minus?
Oh gosh, you always put me on the spot like this.
Uh-huh.
My gut says Malik, but I think that's way too obvious for this. Is this a trick question? There's no way it could have been Tamar.
It partially is. And I'll just go ahead and say it, just because it's leading into the next person I want to talk about. And it's going to shock you a little bit too. It was Race Thompson.
Wow.
With 9 plus minus. The next closest was both Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood Schifino with a plus minus of 5.
Wow.
So a very interesting outlier there, and very interesting to the narrative, obviously, of that sub pattern, and should he be in a lot. And speaking on Race's game, obviously, very excited for him going into this game. Love that they gave him the press conference before it. This is his last game playing in his hometown, home state, and he stated that he is going to have a lot of people there watching for him play and everything. So I'm happy he was able to get out there and was healthy enough to a degree. Obviously, he's still not fully back, but had the chance to play this many minutes in front of his home crowd and everything and contribute like he did, because he's had such a tough go at it as a Hoosier with the injuries and everything. So happy that didn't affect him getting out there. But in this game, again, to me, when I think back on it, and a few of the things and notes that I put, was that it's not the best stat line when you look at it, other than that plus minus for Race. But he was out there doing those Race things, doing those hustle things, and complimenting Trace Jackson Davis to a degree. And then again, his defense, I thought he did the best of anyone we saw all night against Battle. Miller Kopp getting most of, obviously, the run in the first half on him, and then Race taking over for that in the second half as they tried to play Minnesota. That is, tried to play a little bit smaller. But your thoughts on Race?
Yeah, I think getting him this action, these minutes is because as you mentioned, he's clearly not 100%, and that's going to take a while. I mean, when you have a knee injury, not only are you obviously regaining trust in that leg, but the time you're out, you're losing all the stamina you had built up. So I think this is going to pay dividends moving forward as he continues to get healthy, as he continues to gain trust in that leg, and as he continues to get into shape. And as we come down the stretch, I think he's going to be back into the Race form that we've come to know and expect. And we still see that, right? I think he's just playing a little bit hobbled still and getting back into it. But to your point, it's great to see him. It's great to see him be able to go back home and be able to play those minutes in his last time playing up there. I still leave with the sense that he probably played a little bit more than he needed to, especially when we had Malik put up the game that he did. But again, it's hard to sit here and complain too much when you leave with a win. But I'm proud of how hard he battled. This means a lot to him. He wouldn't have come back for a 6th year if it didn't. And so it's good. I think we all had the concern when he went down with that injury that it could be the end of his career. So to be able to see him come back and still have these moments, that to me is pretty cool. So I just hope he can continue to do so, and that this all ends on a pretty good note for him.
Yep. Great to have him. Great to have him back, and great to have him back in a good headspace as well. Because as he had stated, that when he went down with that injury, he knows what it felt like. He knows what those kind of injuries feel like. You kind of do as a basketball player. And he said he saw his whole career, basketball career, kind of flash before his eyes, and it could have been. So to get him back and get him in there, we're going to need him down the road. So it's great to have him. As I lose my internet for a minute, great to have him be able to have this moment for Indiana at home and everything. And hopefully he continues to get better and gets his feet back under him. Next, I want to kind of start looking at some numbers in this game. And there's some weird numbers to look at. There's some good numbers. There's some bad numbers. But an interesting one that I always like to look at and kind of tells the story from the basket struggle for Indiana in the easy baskets, that is. We ended 10 for 19 on layups in this game. Felt like IU struggled to make some of those underneath. Also, a little microcosm to the sense that I felt like IU was getting fouled a lot on a lot of those, and not many of those were getting called. But on the flip side, with Trace Jackson Davis and his blocking, record-setting block game, we forced Minnesota into 9 for 23 from from layups for their sense. So good stat there on the defensive side. Little struggle stat for us on the offensive side. Shooting obviously wasn't the greatest as well, finishing 41% from the field. We were usually a little bit around 50. And the 3-point, as we touted and were excited about in the Michigan State game, with having Trey Galloway making threes like he does, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, Miller Kopp, all that. This game's going to definitely drag us down in that stat with a abysmal 28% from three. So any stats or anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned defense, right? We only gave up 57 points, and I think that when you leave this game, it's skewed by, the fact that we struggled so bad offensively. It's skewed by the fact that, I mean, they threw up some stuff that went in that, I mean, it's barn stuff, right? It's stuff you expect to happen when you go up there. So I think you've got to leave this right. I think you've got to leave this game pretty happy with how we played defensively. It's kind of been the one thing that's clicked for us during this, during this stretch where we've sort of put it back together, right? I think that our defense has been outstanding, and I don't think last night's really any exception. Yeah, they made some stuff, and I don't think it was quite as polished as it's been, but I think that it was still good, and we're going to need that moving forward, especially on these nights when we do tend to struggle offensively. So that sticks out to me, that 57 points. They also, and we've talked about this, but when you look at the combined minutes of Tamar Bates, Jordan Geronimo, and Malik Renew, it's 27 minutes, and that to me is a wild stat. And I want to go back and kind of look at total minutes played on average for the team, but man, the bench was short last night. And I wonder how that looks moving forward. I wonder if it would have looked different if Woody was indeed there. Just, I'm interested in stuff like that. But again, you've got to just take the win, move on, and be happy. 2 weeks ago we were 1-4 in the conference. Right now we sit 5-4. That's a pretty significant turnaround. And I don't think anybody really saw it coming, right? Especially with how we were playing. So you can't sit here and be too upset. You can be a little bit. Again, I mentioned it last night. We don't talk about it. You flush it, you move on, and it's on to the next. So I think that's the spot we're in, and you've got to be happy with where we're sitting in the conference.
And that next one for IU is against Ohio State, a very big game. It's at home. It's this Saturday, January 28th. Definitely check out that game, get to it if you can and everything. But a more important, and I wanted to dedicate enough time to talking about this, is the game tonight against Ohio State. And that's the women's team playing against Ohio State. A game that you need to get out to. This women's team is a very special team. What they are building, what they are creating, how hard these women play, how great it is to see. I mean, them battle. Again, very mirroring the men's team with a very dominant player underneath and everything. This is a big game. This is a big one. It's the blackout game. It's number 6 Hoosiers against the number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes. Make sure you get to that game. All reports, at least from Martha in Indiana weather, sounds like things are getting cleared off, and at least by the tip time of 8:30, weather should be good to get there and everything. So if you are in range, it's a cheap ticket. It's an easy ticket to get to. Hoosier Ticket Project, I think, even has some to help people get there. Get to this game. Martha, talk about this game tonight.
Yeah, I first off, just to hit on your point, the women's team. What a special group. And if you haven't had the chance to experience a women's basketball game at Assembly Hall, it is well worth it. There's, a lot of people like to voice their opinion on women's basketball, right, wrong, or indifferent, usually wrong, in my opinion. Give it a chance. It's you get to go, as you mentioned, Chad, it's a cheap ticket. You get to sit essentially wherever you want in Assembly Hall and watch really, really good basketball. Basketball played the right way. Basketball played hard, played for each other. It's a fun experience. If you have not seen the women's team play in person, you're missing out, and I highly encourage you to do so. As you mentioned, it is an inexpensive ticket. It's free for students, so there's really no excuse for students not to be there. But again, if there are financial burdens, hit the Hoosier Ticket Project up. We will make sure you're there tonight. Zero exceptions. Go to our website, HoosierTicketProject.org. Request tickets. Let us know who you are, how many tickets you need, and we'll reach out to you and make it happen. We want to do this not only for the fans that don't normally have the means to go, but also to help the women get a W tonight. So that's
Yep.
where
And we're going to finish it on that. I'm not going to focus back because, as we said earlier in the show, we are looking past this IU game. We are looking now on to tonight for the women. So I'll focus on the women. They play with heart. They play with emotion. They play true Hoosier basketball. So excited for them. Big game for them and everything. Then after that win, celebrate that. And then the men's team will go on and beat Ohio State as well on Saturday. Thank you for being with us, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at General Chadwick and at the Mop Lady. We'll be back again on Sunday morning after the Ohio State game. Until then, get to the hall tonight. Pack it up. Wear that black. It's a blackout. Go out there, guys. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you later. Let's go Hoosiers.